And then I moved here and I was happy. I kept saying, like,
Continuing education knows that at the end of the day, students want to graduate. And we can help them do that because we really listen to their needs. And we can offer them flexible options, both within continuing education and across the campus.
okay.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
So that, everyone could hear what you were thinking, and they wouldn't, it never even came to me, right? He's like your comms man.
Hello, everyone. This session is being broadcast live on Radio 1190, KVCU 1190 AM Boulder, 92.9 FM Denver, and online at 1190.radio. Thank you for joining us at the 78th Annual Conference on World Affairs. My name is Hunter Pratt, and I am an undergraduate here at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I will be serving as today's moderator. Today's date is Thursday, April 16th, 2026. It is 9:30 a.m., and this session is the podcast revolution from basement mic to business empire. Before we get started, I would like to read the University of Colorado's land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, and supporting student success and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Thank you once again, and welcome to CWA and today's discussion. We ask that all of our attendees remain respectful throughout the discussion and refrain from interruptions. Signs, banners, noisemakers, and other audible disruptions are not permitted and will result in those responsible being asked to leave the room, and please silence your cell phones. Time will be allotted for questions from our in-person audience in the last 15 to 20 minutes of this talk. We will take your questions via handwritten note cards, and please raise your hand if you have a question, and a producer will give you a note card and a pencil. Please print legibly, then raise your hand when you have completed a card, and the producer will collect it and bring it to me. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. I'm joined by three brilliant minds, and I'm very excited for this conversation today. Sarah, would you like to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm based here in Colorado. I'm a news reporter, fill-in anchor for CBS Colorado, and I actually focus in Boulder County, Broomfield County. We do a lot of community journalism. Obviously, news is a changing platform as well. We still focus a lot on television news, but we're doing social media and all different other platforms, which I know we're going to talk about today. I've lived and worked all over the country. We were just talking about it a minute ago. I've worked in Arkansas for national news in New York, DC, for NBC for the Olympics, and gotten to travel a lot to tell a lot of different stories and cover all different kinds of news. So, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And Gabriella?
So I have spent the last 35 plus years in high tech. And I spent more than 25 years at Microsoft. In the 25 years, I worked across 14 different jobs in 6 different disciplines, and traveled all around the world. Since I retired from Microsoft in 2021, I have joined 4 board of directors. I'm on 3 now. Mostly private equity. Prior to leaving Microsoft, I worked on a public board, and they're all private equity-backed technology companies, and then I also do private equity advisory work. In addition to that, my passion lies in enabling women to be more empowered in the workplace and trying to drive more women into technology. I co-founded a group called the Women in Cloud and the Women in Technology Network, both of which have a pretty large footprint all around the world now. We recently published a book. I published a training on allyship and teaching others on how to be allies so that we could create more inclusive environment. And you can find that on my website, which is just GabriellaSchuster.com. And I also had a podcast for about a year and a half, which is why I believe I'm on this panel.
Thank you, Gabriella. And Pushpamala.
I'm coming here from Bangalore, India. I'm coming here from Bangalore, India. I'm an artist, writer, and curator, and my work is strongly feminist, and I try to interrogate the idea of the nation state in my work. So I work in a variety of materials. I'm a trained sculptor, but I also do work with photography, video, and live performance. Actually, I said I was wondering why I was in this panel at all, because I'm very bad with social media. I don't use social media at all, though I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Somebody put me there, but I rarely use it. But I was telling Hunter that I'll sort of talk like an observer, because I'm a great YouTube fan, actually, though I don't actually use it, but I watch a lot of news and other programs on YouTube. And I sort of try to follow this kind of landscape and what's happening in India. So I'll speak very specifically about some of the things that have been interesting things that have been happening in India, with this kind of idea of podcasting.
Great. So podcasting has completely transformed the media landscape. We've gone from centralized media such as TV, radio, and press to now where it's like the Wild West. Anybody that has a microphone can make content and distribute it. And although the barrier for entry has been lowered for making media, the actual ability to be successful in making a business based off of this is an entirely different challenge. So today we'll be talking about how is it that podcasting has become so explosive, and we will also be talking about what is it that people can do to be successful with it as a business. And before we talk business and growth, I wanted to just ground us in the topic and talk about what is the podcast revolution. So Sarah, if you would like to go first, would you tell us what is happening today that wasn't happening before in the sense of media?
I think it's constantly been developing. As technology develops, we're seeing new forms come out, and that includes podcasting, right? And includes social media. And that's starting to become part of your daily job, whereas I still work towards a deadline every day for TV news, because those sources aren't necessarily going away either. You're meeting different people where they're at. So audiences are coming to different formats for different reasons. You want to make sure that you're sharing that information to everyone. So while I'm still trying to meet a deadline for the 6 o'clock news, I'm also trying to get my social media posted by a certain time, that would get the most traction, or find other ways. Maybe I'm posting, going live on Facebook, or in the past I have done podcasting for a different, more niche type of story. And I think as people work to find their niche and find different audiences, that's where you're just trying to spread that information of meeting people where they're at. So as we see new formats, you're going to get different audiences that, we still have a strong audience that watches our television news. If no one was watching, we wouldn't do it, right? And you're also seeing strong audiences on these other platforms. And that's where you're trying to meet people, whether it's through podcasting, social media, television, or anything else.
Great. And Gabriella, do you have anything to add?
My primary platform is LinkedIn. And I started engaging because my job, one of my last jobs at Microsoft, I was responsible for Microsoft's partner ecosystem. And that is an ecosystem of about 400,000 organizations all around the world. And the best way for me to get my message out to them and keep them up to date on what was going on was by kind of broadcasting that across LinkedIn. And so as a result, I have about 36,000 followers on LinkedIn. And it takes a lot to do the care and feeding of that. I really don't do the other platforms. I don't do Instagram and Facebook, just that's all personal stuff, right? So when I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of YouTube, and then when I left, somebody, a CEO who ran a production company, said, "I think it would be great if we could hear from you directly now that you're not a spokesperson for Microsoft and you can kind of comment on things more freely. I think your audience would love to continue to hear from you." And then that's why we started the podcast.
And Pushpa, from your perspective as an observer,
Yeah.
how has consuming media changed for you?
Yeah, I think this whole revolution started in India with the introduction of the cell phone. Now, cell phones are very, very cheap, and every single person, in a family has probably, from, the cities to the villages, have a cell phone, and they're constantly using it. So then I was telling you, I was surprised that TikTok is, there in America because it's been banned in India. But I remember about a decade ago, I think it was very popular in India. And it is a kind of, what happened was it democratized everything, expression in a sense. So some young girl in some village in, say, the north of India, absolute boondocks, would do a little dance in front of the cell phone, and then that would be broadcast, and there would be something like 20,000 views or something like that. Or someone else would do, it was a few seconds or something like that maybe, or a little song or dance to a film song or something like that. But I think then you wonder why, who's watching all this stuff, because it's so funny, when you see it, it's not that amusing. But I think it was catering to this, the northern states are extremely poor. Can you all hear me? Yeah, so they're much poorer than the south, for instance, where I come from, and there's a lot of migrant labor which is going from these, these poor, these northern states to the other cities in India, either to the south or the west or something, which have industries are industrially sort of, developed and all that. So all these migrants live alone. Their families are back home. And they're working as, building roads and building everything, in our cities, for instance. Like all the labor now in my city, for instance, they all come from these faraway states. So when they disappear once a year or twice a year, they disappear like 1 or 2 weeks because it takes so long for them to get there. So these are the people, and there's a whole kind of industry that's going around like that. That's the way they keep in touch with their families, with their villages, with their so-called culture or whatever, like home, in a sense. So it's these funny little things. And then there's also music, there's something called Bhojpuri music, which became very popular. And the whole industry, Bhojpuri films also, very cheaply made things, which are just put up. And these guys, so in between, they're building some, they're, construction workers or something like that. They're in between, they're sort of entertaining themselves or getting a feeling of comfort by seeing these things on their phones.
Thank you. I hear a lot of talk about freedom and ability and democratization of media. So I'd like to ask, who here is gaining the power? Is it the audience? Is it the creators? Is it the platforms? That a lot of creators are getting power and being able to make the media, but where is the power shifting from? And Sarah, would you like to start?
Could you clarify that just a little more?
Yeah, so we now have gone from a centralized media landscape where TV, you have to be hired on to be part of TV, or you have to be hired on as an author to write. But now you do not have to have any qualifications to make a podcast. So there's been a power shift in the sense of media going from this centralized to democratized landscape. And I'm wondering, in what ways has each group, have the creators, the audience, and the platforms either gained or lost power in this?
Not necessarily from a power perspective, but just in that kind of shift of dynamic. I think that for journalism, people are still looking for trusted, reliable sources, and people want to know who you are as well. So if I post a video on social media, you're also looking at my credentials. I was actually just talking with someone in Boulder recently who's more of a news influencer, he calls himself, and we had a great conversation about the difference between a news influencer and a true journalist. So when I post something or when I create a story, I'm making sure that's an unbiased opinion from very reliable sources, and I'm citing all of my sources, and I'm doing a lot of that digging work. I'm calling people, I'm verifying, I'm fact-checking, and doing all of that before I post anything. Whereas if you're a news influencer, people kind of can share their opinion a little more. You can be a little more inflammatory with it. So maybe, you know, if you live in Boulder, one of the newest news, you know, things on social media is about the Dark Horse Bar, for example, right? It's moving. It closed. Everyone's very excited. A lot of news influencers posted their opinion about it, and they were very upset. But when I shared that story, you know, I'm talking about, okay, well, the lease was up, right? So here's the fact from this side, and here's the people who are upset about it. And people are still looking for those reliable sources for that information. You can find yourself in your algorithm in almost an echo chamber, right, if it comes around to it. But people can definitely look for verifiable news sources. Okay, I want my local station. I want my reporter who represents my community who can balance it. Or sometimes someone wants to feel like they're talking to a friend, and maybe that's where they can go to a news influencer who maybe is using my story as the source. So it's kind of a web, and I think it's not necessarily going to go away of people looking for those verified sources, even if more people have access to it, even if someone, you know, blows up online. I know we've seen it recently in national headlines even. A YouTube video goes viral, and then there's a lot of questions following that. But there is a difference between how a journalist covers that and how an influencer may cover that. So I think people will always look for that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But when you think about, you know, who's benefiting from this democratization and access, I mean, I really do think it's everyone. But who's the biggest winners? The biggest winners are the platforms, right? I mean, the biggest winners where the bigger platform gets, the more advertising dollars they get, the more money there is to be made there. They don't really care what it is that people are putting out on their platform. They just want more people to put stuff out on the platform, right? And so they are definitely the biggest winners. But I think that the creators win in that there is a much lower barrier to entry. They can be heard, they can be seen, they can get their voice out there. The onus is on them to figure out how to target an audience and how to get that audience engaged. They're not necessarily going to make money from that, but it could accrue to their brand. It could accrue to their business. It could accrue to whatever else that is that they're trying to accomplish. I mean, it's the same, not just in terms of media, but in terms of even like book publishing. I mean, just the barrier to entry for almost everything has gone way, way down. And so you just have a lot more stuff out there. Now, that means that there's also a lot more crap out there, right? And so as the consumer, you have to ferret through a lot more. So in that sense, you're kind of the loser on that, because there's a lot more that you have to go through to find something that's good or something that's useful. But when you find the people that you trust, the people that you like, the content that you like, then it's not as hard to get to it, whereas before it could have been very hard to get to. So I think that I think there's winners all across the board on that.
Great. And Pushpa, how do you think?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about fake news and how and particularly WhatsApp, it's very, very popular in South Asia, I think, more than anywhere else. I find sometimes like in the West, people don't use WhatsApp at all, but we can't do without WhatsApp. So ever since the rise of the BJP, the Hindu fundamentalist party, which is ruling now, they were the pioneers in using IT. So they set up this IT cell, and which is a kind of factory of producing fake news, hate news, and so on. So then there's this whole phenomenon of trolling. So if they want to kind of destroy somebody, or they want to, whatever, before they want to sort of change public opinion, or they want to have a kind of a hate, sort of target of hate or something like that, or a community or a person, then they go overboard with this sending these WhatsApp messages. And it's so, it just enters everything. Like, for example, we keep discussing, like, we're all part of groups, so there's this family group. Now, my family group has 85 members, and that's not everyone in the family, mind you. So that's only those who are actually on the group. And then we have friends groups, school group, college group, and all that. I'm not a part of those. Somebody put me on a school group, and it was so toxic that I just left, because there's this kind of horrible right-wing hate propaganda going on even in them, And sometimes, the people get so aggressive that they really attack you. So my friend said, don't try to argue with these people, because they'll really attack you, they'll go for you and all that. So everybody's had a fight with these family and other groups, and my friends and people I know. So in my family as well, actually, I protested when certain kinds of posts were put up, and then I discovered that there was a kind of uproar and all that, but I discovered all the younger people, like my nieces and nephews and all those people, actually did not think that way. But there were 4 or 5 people actually in that group who were continuously posting these viral kind of WhatsApp messages which were going around, obnoxious kind of stuff, like to create hate and prejudice and division amongst people generally. So this is one of the downsides of that. And the other thing is that what has happened is that we have something called Godi media. So Godi means lapdog, rap actually. So Godi media is it's a term invented by one of the very famous anchors, TV anchors. It means like sort of lapdog media. So which is something that like the mainstream TV channels are all bought up by big corporate groups. You might have heard of some of them. Which are very international and powerful, and they started sort of controlling the whole news, that was coming out. And so what happened was anybody who had different opinions or would be just thrown out, or they would have to leave. It would be so uncomfortable. So what has happened is a lot of these anchors have started their own TV channels. So there's this YouTube channel, and they are very popular, and mainly it's in Hindi, though it's also in other languages. They don't have such huge audiences because people all over the country watch Hindi news, and so they have like 1 million, 2 million subscribers, and depending on the news also, like the people, like now there's war going on, or there's elections in India and all that, so the news thing goes up. So I'll talk more about these YouTube channels later on.
Gabrielle and Sarah, I think Pushpa brought up a really important fact that now that we have this Wild West in media, there is a huge potential for people to be spreading misinformation. What do you think is important about that today, and how should we deal with that throughout the future, the spreading of misinformation during this completely democratized media landscape?
I think with so many sources, some of it more than before, there's pros and cons, right? Not to fake news, but to having more sources of information. So when I'm looking for a story or want to know more about what's going on, I can find stories that, because someone posted their story, something I may not have ever known about before. And actually some of those stories, it was someone on TikTok or Instagram who had maybe 100 followers. I happened to find it. And then once I did the story, it went on, another person did the story, it got bigger and bigger, and then it went on to change laws, right? So that's definitely an important aspect to remember. But I think with all these sources, some of it falls also on the viewer now, on the consumer, to check what you're watching. I mean, even as a journalist, we'll get sent tips sometimes that we have to really double and triple check, is this a picture of AI? Even if there is a wildfire down the road and that looks exactly like where the wildfire is and it's this amazing shot, it could still be AI. And we have to really check ourselves of before we want to vet something, but consumers now have to vet things a little bit as well. So I think, like you mentioned too, a lot of this comes to the platforms want more content. The platforms, more posts, and, a lot of misleading posts get a lot more clicks if they're more inflammatory or clickbait. And so it's kind of a job of everyone really to verify where your media is coming from, and also on those reliable sources to stay reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to remember that propaganda has existed forever, right? And those that want to spread propaganda will find ways to spread that propaganda. And it just so happens that, like, there are more ways to spread that now than there ever have been, and it can go much further now than it ever could go. And so as a consumer, we have to be vigilant about what it is we're watching, what it is our children are watching, because it preys on those that are weak. It preys on those that are uneducated, and those that don't know how to kind of distill the information. And now with AI, I mean, it's even worse, because now it's infiltrated pictures, right? And now you don't know, is this real, is this AI? But a lot of articles are also just written by AI. And so it is hard. It creates a lot of fiction, and it can be very, very entertaining. And so you just have to consistently consider, what is the impact I'm going to let this media have on me, and how much am I going to believe or trust it? And it just puts more onus on the consumer to seek out those that they know they can trust or they believe in. But it also, I mean, it creates such opportunity for people to be seen, for people to be heard, for laws to be changed, for change. I mean, there have been so many instances where someone is upset about something, and they express that on social media, and then others who have also been upset about that come together, and then they drive change. And so there's a lot of good in that too. So it definitely goes both ways. You can see how it's completely changed the political landscape, for sure, right? There's a lot of good and bad.
So we've mentioned how there's a lot of people making content now. You can almost find anything. We have areas for people to find their niche now, and you have very tight-knit communities and very, very fellow followers. And I wanted to ask, what is it that you guys think makes a podcast successful? What makes an audience keep coming back when there's so many things out there for them to watch? Why is it that somebody would listen to one podcast over another?
Well, so I think, like anything, it comes to the person who's doing the podcast, right? They're charismatic, you like their point of view, you like their background. I think people listen to podcasts because they like the people who are leading the podcast, or they trust the people who are leading the podcast, or they just think they're funny, right? They're a great comedian, whatever it is. I think that's the draw. And then it's on the podcaster to make sure that they have enough, whether it's guests on their podcasts or topics to discuss on the podcast, that it remains interesting, that it's something that maybe somebody hadn't heard before, or it references, or it talks about something that may be topical, right? I have several podcasts that I follow because I trust and value the opinions. Many of them are authors where I've read their books, and then I go out to see if they have a podcast because I'd like to hear more from them and not necessarily just read more books, right? So, there's just, I think it's really the draw of the personality.
And I mean, similarly, as a listener, right, I follow and listen to podcasts as well, and sometimes I'll use that to listen to a bunch of sources. And maybe if I've been focused on this one issue that's impacting Colorado for a few days, maybe I want more national context. And so as I'm getting ready for the day, I'm listening to podcasts to kind of get a little more prepped and have a little more context to what I'm doing. And I think it just adds another layer. In the past, I've had different niche podcasts. You know, one podcast was about connecting different people in my community. So I'd call a different person and the podcast would be a different phone call. Or I've had another podcast where it was actually true crime. And some of that lends itself to those conversations, right? A phone call maybe won't be as interesting on television as it will if you're driving in the car and you can listen to it as a podcast. People love calling in the car anyway. Or same thing with a true crime podcast. Sometimes those stories lend themselves to podcasts more because visually that's sometimes really tough and that's hard, and it might be easier for the families who still want to share their story. So I think it's about finding the medium that's best for that story as well.
Stories, or scandals that come up. Like, for example, recently there was one kind of Epstein-like scandal about a temple, very famous temple in my state. And I found that I was sort of following it, actually, except one one channel, sort of an alternate channel, none of the mainstream guys, because this man was so powerful, nobody was following it. But I found a lot of young kids, they were teenagers, 17 and 18-year-olds, who were sort of getting 1 million views, and you could see they were doing it on their cell phones, from just one person talking, and they were doing research on the whole history of this particular temple, which is a very influential sort of a religious center. And so there was this whole history of like some kind of disappearances and killings and whatnot, which they were sort of digging up from news files, and bringing up. But none of the major news channels followed it at all because the person who was being talked about, who was accused, was too powerful, politically powerful, and religiously powerful as well. He was very kind of dominant in that whole area. So it just depends, because those kids were unknown. I was really surprised. They were undergraduates, 17, 18-year-olds, and they had 1 million, 1.5 million. But I don't know if that continued. I think maybe for that time they just did it. It was not, they had no name or anything, that channel, So different kinds of things are actually happening.
Sarah, you're talking, or actually Gabrielle and Sarah, we've talked about how people are beginning to trust in those who are creating podcasts. Sarah, do you think that people can trust more in these individuals creating content with podcasts more than traditional media? Or do you think it's the other way around?
I don't necessarily know that it's one or the other. As someone who works in traditional media, I think it's kind of all can work together. I don't think one is pitted against the other, I would say.
Sometimes I think news anchors also take up something that's around and very popular in social media, and then take it as a story. So it can also come from bottom up.
Yeah, I think, news tends to be very local, right? And you can get national news, but even the national news tends to be very insular. And so I know personally I like to go out and hear about, like, well, what do they think in Canada of what's happening here? What do they think in, the UK of what's happening here? What's the EU saying, right? And likewise, like looking at what do they say, what do they think is happening in other parts of the world? Because I think, there's always been a slant to the kinds of news we hear. And I think that's true wherever you live, that there's a slant to what is the news that you hear. So I don't know that, I don't know that it's a question of trust. It's a question of, like, now you can get so many different sources, and then you really have to discern, what do you believe? And what do you think is real? And, have you gone to enough to feel like you've gotten to a truth? And if you have a bent or a perspective, you can find it anywhere. And so you can get into an echo chamber and you can get into a loop on that and think you're right. So, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that's always been true. It's just that it comes at you a lot faster now.
I think that the whole thing of trust comes from, as she said, the reputation of the anchor, So some of them are so famous in their original sort of Godi channels that when they were kicked out, and they started their own channel, which is actually very difficult because a single person, building up this whole, and even now, in the earlier sort of their original channels, there were all these people who would go and do research on the ground and all that. Now they can't afford that, So they have to really build up their own channel from scratch. But because of this, in fact, there's this man called, anchor called Ravish Kumar in Hindi channel who's in NDTV, one of the major channels in India, and he got thrown out. But within a year, I think he got 1 million viewers, and now maybe it's 2 million. And again, it depends, if it's Iran war, election, whatnot, scandal and all that sort of thing, then it goes up and down, the number of views that they're getting.
Hunter, if you don't mind, I just want to jump into the topic of this session, which is the business of podcasting. There is not a lot of money to be made from podcasting itself, right? And I don't think anyone goes into being a podcaster because they think this is a way to make a lot of money. It can be that this is a way to get my name out there, build my brand, bring people to my business or people to my passion, right? People to my point of view. I think, but the amount of work necessary to create a podcast and sustain a podcast is actually a lot of work and can be a pretty sizable investment. And even if you got sponsors, you may get sponsors that might offset the costs of doing it, but you are not likely to get sponsorship or advertising dollars that will make you money. The money comes from other things. Like, you look at many of these authors that do podcasts, I think they do the podcast so that you read more of their books, right? So it's about, people do it to become a personality, or people do it to become an influencer, to influence others' opinions. They may be, maybe they're a lobbyist or something, and so the whole thing is to sway people to be thinking a certain way, and they get money from that, but they don't necessarily get money from the podcast itself.
So I'm hearing that podcasting itself is often not the main business. It's not the main thing that's bringing money in, but it could be a way to get the attention to start shifting that towards something else. Podcasts have huge reach, and they're able to bring in a lot of attention, and you can start sharing that somewhere else. So at what point is it that a podcast reaches success? And what is it that keeps people from reaching it?
I think the success has to be defined by the person running the podcast, right? It just depends whatever their objective or their goal is. I mean, I started my podcast because because I did feel like an obligation to my current followership and audience to give them insights into what was going on and help kind of continue to direct them. I mean, one of the things I loved about my job was that I could help people build economic access, build businesses all around the world. And so it was a way of continuing to provide them that insight and that guidance, even though I no longer had the specific Microsoft platform to do that. So that was why I did it. And so when I got feedback from those people and they shared with me or they called back out to me what that enabled them to do or how they were thinking about something differently, then I felt successful. Right? So I think success just varies depending on who the podcaster is.
Yeah, yesterday I went to this session called Trad Wives, and apparently a lot of these trad wives sort of, it's this whole thing of traditional wives, projecting the traditional wife as an ideal, and one of the things they used was recipes and cooking. So that's one thing that's very, very popular, I think, all over the world. MasterChef, and I think the MasterChef programs led it, but then just in all languages in India, for instance, there are these cooking programs. And some of them are so kind of amateur, like it's somebody's tiny kitchen, and then sometimes even a working class place or a lower middle class place is nothing fancy. And they're just showing something, some traditional dish or some dish they've cooked up or something. And they're so popular, again, like, I think they want that popularity, and these may be just housewives, a lot of them. Some of them are of course, chefs. But then these housewives have also got this opportunity, and they've got somebody to hold this phone or camera and, son or husband or daughter or something like that. And then they're happily, broadcasting it. And I follow it and I get recipes from them, So they were one of the most popular kind of YouTube activities, actually.
And Sarah, from your perspective, where we have traditional media as a consistent form of income where you have a paycheck, now with new media, making a podcast and trying to get the attention, delegating that to if it's books or if you're making merch or other forms of income, how do you think that is being affected today, and how does that compare to how media was before?
I don't think I'm really qualified to speak on that. As a reporter, I am on the side of creating content and finding these stories. And as an anchor, a lot of those business decisions, people freelance in journalism as well. And, people do different deals or different setups for their podcasts. So I don't know if I'm the best person to be qualified to speak on the business of podcasting as someone who's, while I'm in different forms of media, I can't tell you how someone's cutting a check in different methods.
Gabriella, what do you think that most people overlook when they first start a podcast?
How much work it's going to be? I mean, so I, as I mentioned, like this gentleman who was running this production company was like, oh, we'll make this so easy, so turnkey for you, right? You will hardly have to do anything. And I was like, so let's talk about what do we have to do, right? Like, well, I have to spend time with him coming up with our editorial calendar, then selecting who are going to be the guests on the podcast, what are the topics going to be, coming up with the questions that I'm going to ask and what we're going to talk about. Then we actually have to have time to record the podcast. And then, once that's done and he takes it and starts doing, magical editing and production, then I have to watch the podcast and provide my commentary, and then I have to send it to the guest to make sure they're okay with it. And then once it's published, then I have to promote it, right? I mean, that was not a minimal amount of turnkey work, right? And so, that was why, like, after about 1.5 years of doing that, I was like, this has been great. I feel like we've, really given people a lot of insight. It's had good impact, and I'm done.
Sarah, you've also had a little bit of experience with making podcasts. Could you tell me what your experience was like with making that podcast or being on the podcast versus your roles as a journalist or as a news anchor?
I mean, one doesn't necessarily exclude the other. You know, there are plenty of journalists who also have podcasts at the same time. I mean, that's what I did in the past. And I think it's just another avenue, you know? Like she said, it's, I think, a lot more work than people think. Same thing with social media videos. If I'm cutting together something that explains my story that I'm going to do in full for the 10 o'clock newscast, maybe down to 30 seconds, that still takes a time to edit everything together, layer it, make sure the audio sounds nice, and that work goes into a podcast as well. So I think any form of media that you're doing as a journalist, and you're still doing the basic tenets of journalism and the basic ethics of journalism, and that takes time. And then on top of that, so do the technical editing styles and things like that. So I think one doesn't necessarily exclude the other, but I think it's another avenue. So maybe if that day or the whole week or something, I've been following this breaking news story or this trial, and there's another story happening that maybe I couldn't fit in the newscast, maybe there's another avenue for it. Maybe I can put it on social media. Maybe I can share it on a podcast. But I think one doesn't rule out the other.
And Pushpamala, from your creative background, I wanted to ask, how does somebody balance creating something meaningful with the pressure to make it successful?
Well, one doesn't know whether it's going to be successful or not. I experiment a lot with my work, and I just have to be passionate and convinced about it. And sometimes after 10 years of, like, you know, I'm actually a sculptor, and when about 10 years on, I started working with the photo performance, and I did this, had this exhibition, and everyone loved it and laughed like hell, you know, it was very funny. And they said, oh, when are you going to do sculpture, you know, what's your next sculpture? So it took me 10 years of working with that medium for people to take me seriously. And now those works are seen as classic works, you know. So you don't know. And then, again, like, if you talk about success in terms of money, like somebody who does painting or sculpture definitely makes far more money than somebody who works with these kind of materials which are still not seen as sort of classic or traditional, like photography or video or performance. You know when you choose that material, you're not going to make money, you know. So you have to manage with whatever. But I want to say something. I mean, I don't know whether Zoom is included in this, in this podcast thing. Because what happened was I was doing a live performance, and suddenly it was during COVID. I mean, COVID had just started then, and we'd organized everything that I'd have this, you know, live performance. I was going to do a cooking performance, actually, in a kind of an art space. And after we organized everything and sent out the invitations, we found that it was going to be like there was a lockdown because of the COVID. So we said, okay, like we'll have it on Zoom. And we won't call anybody, and we sort of sent around the message that it'll be on Zoom. So it's very interesting because I asked 2-3 of my friends to come, and see, it's like for 45 minutes I just cook. So there are these sounds of cooking, smells of cooking, and then I'm using the mixer grinder, I'm using a gas stove and a pressure cooker and cutting things and all that. And nothing else happens. And people were sort of quite spellbound, like watching the whole thing, even though in real life you never actually see a complete experience the entire sort of thing of making a dish, you know, even in a kind of TV program. But what happened actually on the Zoom thing, that all those things were missing, you know. So it was this, so some people wrote by, what is this boring thing and all that, for 45 minutes you're standing there and you're just cooking, and, you know, some people enjoyed it because they had the patience to see it, and then it was a very conceptual sort of thing also. I mean, it was quite colorful and all that. I was dressed up as Mother India and like with a crown and all that, and I was using these modern implements and all that, and cooking. So it's a very different experience, the live performance, because apparently I was asked to be on this panel because of the performance aspect, you know, but the live performance is very different. So if you want to make a video, then it has to be constructed in a completely different way. It has to be entertaining. And I think that's what they're talking about. It has to be entertaining, you know. So it's not just, it has to be edited properly. The material has to be like, you know, you can't just boringly go on droning on about something, and you have to kind of, you know, be serious at the same time, you know, just see that you grab people's attention, I think.
Yeah, actually, to that point, I mean, I had a number of guests where, you know, even though we had talked about the things we would talk about, I still wanted it to feel very natural, right? But they a couple people just went on and on and on and on and on, right? And they didn't, and it was like hard to get them back, and so I'd say, cut, let's do that again, and give them feedback on like, okay, you just got to remember, people are listening for the point. So let's get to the point and try and make it shorter, right? And maybe you don't have to give everybody all this background on what you wanted to say.
And Gabriella, if somebody here in the audience wanted to start a podcast and turn it into a career, where do you think they should first start?
Well, obviously there's a reason why you feel like you have something to say, and you have an idea. So you really want to start with creating some sort of following, right? Because once you put the podcast out there, if nobody watches it, no one's going to watch it. And unless you can do something that makes it viral, which is hard, then it will just sit there. And podcasts that age then become even less attractive because people don't really watch aged podcasts. There's too much other things that they can do. So I would say, be clear about your audience and try and generate some engagement even before that, right? Think about like, maybe you start with a TED Talk, right? So instead of starting with a podcast, you create a TED Talk and you go give a TED Talk so that you can create some followership there, and then you bring them to your podcast. All TED Talks then go up on YouTube, and if you can get a TED Talk to have, I think it's something like, it was either 25,000 or 50,000 views, then it stays up on the TEDx thing, and then you can add to it. You can say, oh, now I have a podcast, and then you can direct people to your podcast. So you really want to create that groundswell first. I mean, for me, it was my job, was the way that I did that at first, right? So that may be also something that you can do. You can look at your current network. You could look out the platform that you have in your current position and make that the jumping off point. But you really want to have that, and then you move into what are the topics that are most interesting to that audience, and how am I going to then make sure they know it's there. And so you have to do a lot of promotion, and you have to make it very edgy and really bring people in and get them excited about watching it. And I would say don't make your podcast too long. My nephew has a podcast. He's just starting a business, and he's an ultramarathon runner, and he's trying to attract other people who want to become runners or ultramarathon runners. And his podcast is like an hour and a half long. And I've given him this feedback. I'm like it's interesting and your guests are interesting, but if you looked at your analytics, I'm guessing people are staying on for like 20 minutes. There's no way someone is watching that for an hour and a half. I mean, I love you, and I have tried to stay on for an hour and a half, and I cannot, right? So, so I would say shorter is better.
Sarah, I think that Gabriella hit on an important point about the platforms that people already have when they're creating a podcast. Do you think that because it's so easy to make a podcast now, that anybody that can should? Or do you think that more creators should be starting with a more fundamental background in some type of journalism or public speaking or something like that?
I think it all depends on your personal goals. I don't think someone should or shouldn't do something because they have access or don't have access. And some people still don't have access, It's not, a podcast isn't just like a selfie or a voice note for an hour and then you hit post and suddenly you have 1 million views. There's a lot of work that goes into anything, I think. And I think, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to have a degree to have a podcast. If your goal is to have a podcast of what's going on in your neighborhood and just talk to neighbors and you're not claiming to be a journalist, then go nuts, But if you want to be a journalist and do news stories on this podcast, then maybe, yeah, have that background and make sure it's all about, the source that it's coming from and what your goal is. But I don't think any of us are here to dictate who gets to say and post what.
One of my husband's favorite podcasts is this podcast that talks about the Giants, the football team, right? Every day, some woman talks about what's going on with the Giants. And I'm like amazed that she has enough to say that she can create a podcast to talk about the Giants every single day. She talks about different players, she talks about what's going on, I mean, whatever. But he listens to it every single day, right? So, I mean, there's just something for everybody.
We see a lot of celebrities now making podcasts, like Neil deGrasse Tyson has a podcast, and a lot of actors are beginning to make podcasts. What do you think it is that they are doing? Is it their background that is influencing their audience more, or do you think it's their charisma, or what is it that other people who don't have that background as a celebrity can do to become more successful with a larger audience in podcasting?
Well, again, I mean, I think it's podcasts. You listen to a podcast because of the person that's doing it, and I think celebrities, people want to know them. They want to feel like they know them. They want. They like what they like. They want to be like them. I mean, and so they watch them. They listen to them, and so I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I mean, he knows so much. People want to know so much. They want to know what he's thinking about. What is he considering, right? So there's just all sorts of reasons why, like it's just that personality, just people are attracted to that personality for one reason or another. But I mean, like at the same time, like I said for my husband, like he just wants to, when, like he thinks about the Giants all the time too, right? And so he just wants to know someone else is also thinking about them and kind of validate what he's thinking, right? I mean, that's just, I think, what people like.
I love baby elephant videos. I watch them all the time. No, one of the things in India which are very, very popular is, I mean, there again, like, I think if you're already, you're known in something, is these comedians. So they're extremely popular, They already have shows. Like they've been, for some years, they have been having maybe live shows. And they travel around the country. But what has happened recently is that those live shows are projected. And it's very simple. It's one guy just talking usually. But some of them are more elaborate. There's one guy who's extremely popular who has elaborate sets and lots of different people. And he gets celebrities and all that. But most of them is actually one guy. And sometimes it's just like, in some place, like in some little hall, he's talking. But what they're getting is they're popular there in the small way, but by projecting their YouTube channel, they get a huge audience all over the country. So without actually physically going to eat, though they still do physically travel about. So that's one thing, I mean, with the kind of chefs or the cooking channels, the other very popular thing in India in the YouTube channels is this comedy, They're also like celebrities, some of them. Or they get celebrities onto the show.
Great. So we've talked a lot about how anybody can make a podcast, but actually becoming successful and making money off of it is not so easy. But I'd like to start switching to our audience Q&A session. I have some questions here. I'll try to get through as many of them as I can. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get through all of them. We'll open these questions up to the entire panel, so whoever wants to answer them first may do so. Our first question is, how can you tell if something is AI generated?
I don't know if any of us are the expert on that. I think everyone is looking as technology advances for what that is and what that looks like. I know there's a few different things you look for, and the first thing being in news is this too good to be true? Is this unbelievable? And then double checking where you got that information from. A lot of the things that other people talked about, typos, but I think a lot of that source is going to come from someone who works in tech and knows how these AI models work.
Funny enough, I think that the Gen Zers have a better sniff test towards things that are AI generated than many of us do. My daughter, when she reads something, she'll go, "Oh, that's AI." I'm like, "How do you know that?" And she's like, "Just the way they said this. It's just, nobody talks like that." Right? And my son, he's in film and TV production, and he can tell like that when, something has been messed with, right? He even just knows when it's been edited or what's been edited about it, right? So, I think that when you grow up with the media of that, it may be a little easier to tell. I do some, AI-generated things. It makes it easier for me. But then I go back and I add much more personality to it, right? Or, sometimes I will add mistakes so that people know it was really me, right? I think it's hard.
There are these very popular programs, some of which I got hooked on to, and it's entirely AI. I mean, it's usually this kind of victim story, So it's about this elderly man or woman who's cheated by their families. So the children steal all their property and they throw them out. But then they succeed and they kind of, they beat them to it and take revenge. It's all about revenge. Or sometimes it's a young daughter who's sort of insulted and thrown out of the family, So they don't even bother to have a video or any movement. They just have different kinds of faces, coming on. It's not even the same person. Though they're talking about one person, it's not even the same person. And then there's this kind of voice with an American accent, with a particular kind of intonation, it's completely fake. And they're talking about this, sometimes it's in first person and sometimes it's in third person, and it goes on and quite long, 1 hour. I mean, you said it's quite compelling. I've watched them sometimes for 1 hour because I wanted to know what's going to happen, And so it's goes on for 1 hour and 1.5 hours. So this is another phenomenon. It's entirely, I don't know who's doing it, And one of the things the voice is one thing, but also the images. It's not only AI that people are using, they're using, for example, if even the present war news, they use material from some other period, like say 10 years back or 5 years back or last year or something. So it's not necessarily the truth, even though there are these kind of some fighter jets flying and all that. It's not from today because there's so much censorship that they can't get that material, So they're getting that material from the past, from archives actually, and then using it. So you have to be it's different kinds of things that are going on, The fakeries that are going on, and some well-intentioned maybe because they can't get that material. They want to show something happening behind the anchor or something like that. And the other thing is absolutely, we can make out AI, because there'll be some kind of, shake or movement or some. There was one whole thing about 6 fingers, somebody's sixth finger and all that in one thing. Yeah, Netanyahu, I think. Yeah.
All right, our next question is, do you think the rise of AI-generated content will have the effect of increasing people's appetite for traditional news sources, which fact-check more and vet their content?
I think these are good questions, but I think a lot of it's speculative also. I think as we see this technology change, there's no guarantee of anything, right? A lot of trends are changing as models change, as we see more creators. I think as someone who works as a local broadcast journalism, there will always be that tenet of trust of we are a verified source. I'm someone who lives in your community, and I'm someone who, if you look at my past stories, is reliable source. So I think there always will be a desire for reliable information, but I also see as technology and tools develop and new platforms develop, you're also spreading to that. So I think we're just gonna kind of have to wait and see how all of those mediums come together.
Yeah, I can also foresee a future where, AI-generated content is when it's not hallucinating, is, actually a great amalgamation and summary of everything that's going on. So it has to get better. But I guess to the point of, will we try and get back to trusted sources? I hope.
Well, I think one of the things that I was talking about my family group and these WhatsApp groups, I have a feeling now a lot of people, middle class, well-educated people, I don't even read the news or see the news or something like that. They're just believing this nonsense, fake news that's been every day it's put into the, the WhatsApp groups. And that's the kind of strategy, and it's been working. So it's very disturbing, actually. And you say, like, these people are like very well-educated, sensible people, and why are they posting this rubbish, which is, but they do. I mean, they.
All right, and our next question is, how heavily are podcasts monitored for their content compared to news sources that have been fact-checked, especially for more educational podcasts that consumers might be more inclined to trust and believe?
I think that comes down to knowing your source. If you can look into who the podcast is from, what company that is, what their past stories are, I think that's how you get a little more information of where this source is coming from and how much fact check or what viewpoint this is coming from. If it's a news source that you know the name, you know the stories, then great. And if it's maybe a brand new podcast, maybe, has one view, has never posted before, maybe you want to dig a little deeper into what is my source of information. And I think that's where you're going to get a lot of that context. I also want to share, I'm so sorry, but I do have to run because I'll be anchoring our next show in just about an hour. And I got to get back to Denver. But thank you all so much for having me, and sorry to leave on cut it short.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the only other part I would add is there is no regulatory body of podcasts and media and social media, and and even the platforms are not. I mean, we know from all the news, the platforms are not looking after our best interests and looking at what it is, and so another place to look to see if this is trusted is who's sponsoring them and what their sources, what they're sponsoring, whether they have been incented in some way because of that sponsor.
Okay, we'll see if we're able to answer this one. Do we have data on the rate of attrition of podcasts? For example, the average length of time people stick at it, etc.
So I've never done any, specific research or data on this, but I do know from the work that I used to do and what I have seen, and then personally, I think that the attention span is pretty small. Most people will stay on for about 8 minutes. 20 minutes starts to really pressure test people. Beyond that, you get a select group of people who maybe they listen to a podcast generally on their way to work. So maybe you get them for an hour because they have an hour commute, and why not, right? So it really varies a lot, and a lot on your demographic. Younger people, shorter attention span.
It depends, I think, because as I said, these crazy AI-generated melodramas go on for 1.5 hours, And obviously people, even me sometimes, I listen to it because I just want to, I'm curious about what's happening. But another interesting thing that's happening in India is this financial advisors. So they take up a case, and apparently everyone's in debt. We thought this was a kind of American phenomenon from credit cards, but it's happening a lot in India. But the reasons might be different. For example, there's a lot of it is family debt. Like somebody, the daughter's marriage or the sister's marriage or the parents' home, they take a lot of loans. And so these are also very popular, you know. So I don't know how suddenly I'm finding them coming up, and they seem to have a huge, they're like celebrities or stars. I don't know how they started off, but these people, the ones podcasting, they seem to be like, and they take up cases. You have to apply and to write to them about your problem. That sometimes it says, this person is earning 10,000 rupees and have several hundreds of thousands of rupees loan. How do I pay it back, you know? So it's quite interesting, actually, what the advice those people give.
All right, we are running out of time. We can't get to the rest of the questions, but thank you all who have submitted questions, and thank you all for coming today. And can we get a round of applause for our panelists, please?
Thank you.